Just sign here, Mom. It's nothing complicated. That was the line my son used, calm, polite, and practiced, as if he'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. His tone had that smooth confidence men use when they've already decided the outcome. What would you do if the people you loved most betrayed you in front of the world? Don't miss a single second. This story will make you hold your breath until the truth is revealed. The hospital room smelled like bleach and wilted carnations. My wrist still carried the faint marks of the 4 band, my fingers trembling slightly as I reached for the pen. It was 10:47 in the morning. The sunlight fell across the edge of my blanket, catching the silver band of my wedding ring, the one thing I still wore from the life I'd built with my late husband. Insurance documents, Michael said, tapping the corner of the papers. You know, for your peace of mind. So I can handle the bills if you ever get too tired to deal with them. Too tired. That phrasing hit harder than it should have. I looked up from the paper and caught his eyes, pale green just like his father's. But where my husband's eyes had held warmth, Michael's glinted with something cold and careful. His wife, Jenna, stood by the foot of my bed, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She smiled the way someone does when they think they've already won. "We just want to help, Mom," she said softly. "You've been through enough." I studied her manicured hands, one resting on the hospital rail, the other clutching that cup too tightly. I could smell her perfume, floral and expensive, the kind that lingered long after she left the room. My stomach turned. I'd spent my life reading faces, as a teacher, as a mother, as a widow trying to survive small-town gossip. And that morning I read 2 faces that said trust us, while their eyes whispered sign fast. The papers were neatly clipped together. I noticed the corner of my address, 221 Cedar Avenue, printed in bold on the second page. My house. The only place that had never betrayed me. "What's this part for?" I asked casually, pointing to the section labeled, Transfer of Authority. Michael leaned forward, smiling. "Just gives me permission to handle your mortgage, taxes, all that boring stuff. You shouldn't worry about paperwork when you need rest." I nodded, pretending to read, though I already knew. The night before, while Jenna was out running errands, I had heard them whispering in the hallway outside my room. I wasn't asleep. Morphine dulls the pain but not suspicion. I'd caught fragments of their conversation. Words like title, loan, and signature. So I'd already made my move. Before sunrise, I'd called my late husband's lawyer's office, left a quiet message confirming my living will and financial permissions. I'd also asked for copies of every document Michael had ever requested in my name. My voice had trembled, but my mind had never been clearer. "I trust you," I said, now my tone steady. Michael's smile widened, relief flashing across his face. "Good. That's what families are for." Families. Such a sweet word for people who carve you open with pens instead of knives. I pressed the pen against the line, pretending to hesitate. "My hand's still weak," I murmured. "You might have to guide it." He reached forward, gently wrapping his hand over mine. His skin was warm, firm, confident, like a man convinced he was holding power itself. I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the heart monitor beside me. Each beep echoed like a countdown. When the pen met paper, he guided me through the signature letter by letter, as though he were helping a child spell her name. His grin grew each second. He thought he was watching the moment I handed over everything. What he didn't know was that the lawyer's office would timestamp my earlier voicemail, proof that I'd revoked all previous authorizations hours before this little performance. I signed with a shaky hand and a calm heart. "Perfect," he said, gathering the papers. "You can rest now, Mom." Jenna stepped closer, smoothing the blanket over my lap as if tucking me in. Her ring, a diamond I had once paid for, caught the light and flashed across my eyes. "You'll see," she whispered, leaning down. "This will make things easier for everyone." Her breath smelled like peppermint and something metallic. I didn't answer. As they turned to leave, I glanced at the bedside table. My old cell phone rested there, the red recording light faintly glowing under the tissue box. A small precaution I'd taken weeks earlier when I started noticing how often they forgot to bring me copies of what I signed. Michael looked back once before closing the door. "Get some sleep, okay? We'll take care of everything." "I know you will," I said softly. "You always do." When they were gone, the silence pressed against me. I reached under the blanket and touched the edge of my blue notebook. the one I'd kept hidden inside the hospital drawer behind my medications. Inside, I'd written dates, times, and every strange thing Michael had said since my husband's funeral. October 4th. Michael asked for my social security number. Claimed he was checking pension paperwork. October 7th. Jenna requested copies of property deeds. Said she needed to reassure the insurance agent. October 15th. Found voicemail from unknown number discussing appraisal of house. Michael's voice faint in background. I'd written everything. His memory fades but ink doesn't. A nurse came in a few minutes later. A young girl named Elise who always hummed while changing 4 bags. She smiled. Your son seems very attentive, Mrs. Reynolds. I smiled back though my throat felt tight. He's a good actor, I said quietly. She laughed thinking I was joking. You're lucky to have family helping. Most patients don't. Maybe, I said closing my notebook, but help and control our cousins, dear. You just need to know which one's visiting. She looked puzzled then left me to rest. By noon the sky had turned gray. I could hear thunder rolling in the distance, the kind of storm that makes hospital windows hum. I watched raindrops streak down the glass, each one racing the next to hit the sill. I thought about how much Michael had changed. After his father's death he'd been kind for a while, coming by to mow the lawn, fixing the loose kitchen cabinet, eating dinner with me twice a week. But kindness had an expiration date. By spring he'd started dropping hints about retirement plans and financial security. He'd even joked once, "You've got more savings than I'll ever earn." I'd laughed then, but that laughter sat bitter in my throat now. Around 3 p.m. I got up from bed, ignoring the nurse's protests, and slowly walked to the small cupboard near the sink. Inside was a plastic folder, the one Michael thought I'd thrown away months ago. It contained duplicates of every property and insurance document my husband and I ever signed. I slipped today's insurance papers inside, sealing them carefully with a clip. Then I took a photo of each page with my phone, the flash lighting the sterile room like lightning. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation. By evening, the hospital halls grew quieter. The storm outside had passed, leaving a damp, heavy calm. I sat watching the television with the volume low, half listening to a commercial about senior living communities. I imagined Michael watching something similar at home, maybe telling Jenna how easy that had been, how cooperative I'd been. That thought didn't make me angry. It made me patient. I've always believed anger burns too fast. Patience, on the other hand, stays warm enough to keep you alive through the coldest betrayal. The next morning I woke early. The nurse said Michael had called, said he'd handle my discharge paperwork. I nodded and asked her for a cup of black coffee and the phone directory. When she left, I dialed my lawyer again. Mr. Clayton? It's Eleanor Reynolds. Please confirm that voicemail from yesterday morning was logged, the one about financial authorization. He hesitated. Yes, Mrs. Reynolds, it's time-stamped at 6:12 a.m. Why do you ask? Because my son will soon try to undo it, I said, keeping my voice even. And when he does, I want that record untouched. He sounded concerned. Is everything all right? I smiled faintly. Not yet. But it will be. By the time Michael and Jenna returned that afternoon, I was sitting upright, dressed, my bag packed. Leaving already? He asked, surprised. I've always hated hospitals, I said. They smell like endings. He laughed nervously. You'll feel better at home. I already moved your mail there. Did you? I asked, sliding my phone into my purse. How thoughtful. Jenna glanced at me, her smile thinner now. We stopped by the house earlier. Cleaned up a bit. You'll love what we did with the living room. Something cold settled in my chest. My living room. My husband's chair. My memories. I zipped my bag shut and met her gaze. I'm sure I will. Outside, the sun had returned, sharp and blinding. As Michael helped me into the car, I looked at the side mirror and caught my reflection. Tired eyes, thin lips, but steady hands. He climbed into the driver's seat, humming to himself. Jenna scrolled through her phone, smirking at something. I looked out the window as we passed the sign that read Cedar Avenue, 1 mile. My house waited at the end of that road. So did their lies. And inside the safe they thought was empty, a few surprises of my own were waiting. I folded my hands in my lap and smiled faintly. Let them think I'd sign my life away. They had no idea what I'd just started. The ride home was quiet, except for the faint hum of tires on wet asphalt. Michael kept his eyes on the road, tapping the steering wheel to the rhythm of some song only he could hear. Jenna sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone with a smirk tugging at her lips. I watched the water streak down the car window, thinking how easily things disappear. Raindrops, patience, trust. When we turned onto Cedar Avenue, my stomach clenched. My husband had built that house with his own hands 40 years ago. But as we pulled into the driveway, it didn't feel like home anymore. The lawn was cut too short. The porch light, which I always left on during trips, was off. And there was a for sale sign lying face down near the mailbox. "Don't mind that," Michael said quickly. "We had a realtor look at some options, just in case you ever wanted to move closer to town." He said it so casually, so smoothly, as if he was doing me a favor. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Jenna didn't even look up. She just said, "We can talk about it after you rest, Mom." I smiled faintly. Of course. After I rest. But that night rest never came. The house felt wrong. The air was too still and the scent of bleach clung to the hallway like guilt. My favorite photos were gone from the mantle. The one of my husband fishing with Michael and the one of me holding our newborn grandson. In their place sat a vase of fake lilies, glossy and lifeless. I opened my bedroom door and froze. My dresser drawers were half empty. The jewelry box my husband gave me on our 25th anniversary sat open, every piece missing except one, the small silver locket he'd bought from a roadside stall. Inside was a faded picture of us smiling in front of that same house. I slipped it into my pocket. From the hallway, I could hear Michael's muffled voice. "We'll finalize the listing next week," he said. Then Jenna's response, quieter, sharper. "She won't even know, Michael. Just be patient." I stood in the dark, hand pressed against the wall to steady myself. The sound of betrayal is never loud. It's soft, careful, and confident. The next morning I made coffee in my kitchen, or what was left of it. My blue ceramic mugs were gone, replaced by a new set with gold trim. The sugar jar had been moved. Even the spice rack was different. Michael came down the stairs in a crisp shirt, like he was heading to a business meeting. "Morning, Mom," he said cheerfully. "You look better today." "Better than what?" I asked. He blinked, taken aback. "Than you did yesterday, of course." "Yesterday I was sick," I said. "Today I'm just watching." He gave an awkward laugh. "You really should take it easy." Then he kissed my forehead like a dutiful son, the gesture hollow. When he left for work, I went straight to the office. The computer had a new password. My filing cabinet was locked. But the printer tray still held something. A single sheet of paper that had jammed halfway through. I pulled it out gently, the ink smudged but readable. "Home equity line of credit, primary residence, Eleanor Reynolds." My breath caught. That house wasn't mortgaged. It had been paid off for 20 years. The next few days blurred together, but every detail cut sharp. No mail arrived. No bills, no pension checks. Nothing. I called the post office. They said my forwarding address had been updated. "By who?" "Your son, ma'am," the clerk said. "He came in personally." When I asked where the mail was being sent, the woman hesitated. "To a P.O. box under his name." I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my notebook. I wrote everything down: the sign, the missing mail, the new locks, the fake lilies. I drew a small line under the last note and wrote, "He thinks I'm asleep." Doris, my next-door neighbor, knocked that afternoon. She's 73, quick-witted, and the kind of woman who sees everything but pretends she doesn't. "Eleanor, dear," she said, stepping inside. "I saw Michael talking to a young man out front last week. Some realtor, I think. He said you were thinking of moving south." My heart thudded. "Did he now?" "Oh yes," she said. "He even showed him around, opened the garage and all. I thought it was strange since your car was still inside." I managed a smile. "Maybe he's just being proactive." Doris tilted her head. "You raised that boy too polite for his own good. But lately he looks at you like you're a problem to solve, not a mother to love." I swallowed hard. "You always did notice too much, Doris." She smiled gently. "And you've always been too kind." When she left, I closed the curtains and locked the door. Then I picked up the phone and called the bank. The hold music played for 7 minutes before a voice answered. "Mrs. Reynolds? Yes, we have your account here. Could you verify your son's authorization on the home loan?" "My son doesn't have authorization," I said. "Pause. Ma'am, he's listed as joint owner now. The change was processed 3 weeks ago. My pulse quickened. Processed how? With your signature, ma'am. I closed my eyes. Could you send me a scanned copy? I'm afraid I can't do that without written consent from both parties, the voice replied politely. Both parties, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. Of course. I hung up and stared at the phone. My reflection in the black screen looked older, smaller. But my eyes were sharper than they'd been in months. Days passed. Michael stopped visiting. He called once, saying he was busy, sorting out some legal paperwork. Jenna texted occasionally, short, cold messages. Hope you're resting. Drink more water. We'll come by soon. I started walking around the neighborhood every morning, pretending to be fragile. People smiled kindly, assuming I was just another lonely widow. But every step had purpose. I noted which cars parked in front of my house. I memorized which lights came on at night. One evening I saw a man standing by my mailbox. A realtor, pressed suit, clipboard, shiny shoes. He was measuring the front porch steps. I waited until he left, then stepped outside. There, tucked into the mailbox, was a brochure for a real estate agency. On the back, in Michael's handwriting, "Let's make this quick. She won't last long." My hand shook as I folded the paper and slipped it into my notebook. The isolation grew thicker. Calls from friends slowed, then stopped. I found out later why. Michael had told everyone I was moving to Florida to start fresh. The phone company said my landline had been disconnected for non-payment. But every evening I turned on my old laptop, the one Michael didn't know I still had. I backed up copies of my will, my husband's death certificate, and the property deed. Then I started taking photos of everything. The mailbox, the missing jewelry, the documents, even the for sale sign when it reappeared upright one morning. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was evidence. A week later, Doris stopped by again with a casserole and a worried look. "Eleanor, I hate to say this, but I saw movers outside earlier. Are you going somewhere?" I smiled thinly. "Not me, Doris. Someone else might be." She frowned. "I'm not sure I follow." "You don't have to," I said gently. "But thank you for checking in." After she left, I went into the study. The safe sat quietly in the corner, untouched, uncracked. They didn't know I'd memorized the combination by heart. My wedding date. I turned the dial slowly, the clicks echoing in the still room. Inside were my husband's old tapes, his handwritten notes, and the original property deed with both our signatures. I ran my fingers over the paper, tracing his name, Daniel Reynolds, before adding my latest evidence. The truth had a way of collecting quietly, like dust in corners no one bothers to clean. By the end of that second week, I no longer felt afraid. I felt focused. The fear had burned off, leaving something cleaner, sharper. I started recording my own notes out loud each night, my voice calm and steady. Day 12. Michael hasn't visited. Mail still missing. Realtor called again. House being shown Friday. Each word steadied me like footsteps on solid ground. When the phone finally rang late that evening, I recognized Michael's number. His tone was cheerful, too cheerful. "Hey Mom. Just checking in. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said. "The house looks lovely. Almost like new." He laughed nervously. "Yeah, Jenna wanted to freshen it up. She's been talking to a few people about renovations." "Renovations," I repeated. "That's one word for it." "Don't sound so suspicious," he said lightly. "You'll love what we're planning." "I'm sure I will," I replied, my voice low. "But plans have a funny way of changing." He hesitated. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said sweetly. "Just make sure you keep all your receipts. You'll need them soon." When the call ended, I sat in the dark, the clock ticking on the mantel. I could feel the weight of what was coming, like the heavy air before a storm. They thought I was losing control. But the truth was, I'd never been more in control of my life, or theirs. And as I closed my notebook for the night, I whispered to myself, "Disappear all you want, Michael. I'm still watching." Those words lingered in the quiet house long after I whispered them. The night air pressed against the windows, heavy and damp. The only sound was the slow tick of the clock above the mantel, counting the seconds between my patience and my rage. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Every corner seemed cleaner, emptier, scrubbed of me. My favorite chair was gone. The family portrait had vanished from the wall. But the safe was still there. Hidden behind the old bookshelf in the study. They hadn't dared to touch that yet. It was just after midnight when I decided to open it. I moved slowly, careful not to make a sound. The floorboards groaned beneath my steps, the way they always had when my husband used to sneak downstairs for late-night coffee. That sound used to comfort me. Tonight it sounded like a warning. I pushed the bookshelf aside inch by inch. Dust rose in tiny clouds, and the smell of old paper and wood polish filled the air. My husband's safe sat against the wall, black, heavy, unbothered by time. My knees cracked as I crouched in front of it. I brushed my fingers over the metal dial, the numbers barely visible in the dim lamplight. 0 to the right. 22 to the left. 17 back. My wedding date. The same combination Daniel had chosen all those years ago. When the lock clicked open, I exhaled for the first time all night. The door creaked as I pulled it forward, the faint smell of machine oil escaping like a secret. Inside were the ghosts of a life I once trusted. Insurance folders, handwritten letters, a few dusty cassettes, and a stack of photographs bundled with twine. At the bottom lay a small brown envelope labeled in Daniel's handwriting, "In case of emergency." My hands trembled as I picked it up. I unfolded the papers carefully. They were property documents, the original deed to the house, notarized and sealed. My name and Daniel's side by side, ink faded but intact. My heart tightened. He'd always said, "No one will ever take this from you, Ellie." I set the deed aside and picked up the old cassette tapes. Each one had a small white label. Insurance calls, 2002, bank meeting, 2005, Michael, 2010. My husband had recorded everything. It hit me then, he'd known even back then that Michael had a streak of deceit. He'd never said it aloud, but he must have felt it in the same small ways I had. The missing cash from his wallet, the sudden questions about how much the house was worth, the fake apologies that always came too late. I plugged in the dusty tape recorder still sitting in the corner cabinet. When I pressed play, the sound of Daniel's voice filled the room, deep, calm, familiar. "This is Daniel Reynolds," he said. "Confirming that my wife, Eleanor, is sole beneficiary of the property and pension, effective immediately." Then a pause. Said, "Michael's been asking questions again. I pray he grows out of this hunger for more." My throat burned. I stopped the tape, afraid to hear more. A noise came from upstairs, a soft thump like a door closing. I froze. For a moment I wondered if I was imagining it. But then came another sound, footsteps. Slow, careful. I turned off the lamp and stood still, my breath shallow. The air shifted, faint floor creaks tracing their way down the hall. My hand found the old brass letter opener on the desk. Not much of a weapon, but it steadied me. The steps paused near the stairs. Then silence. I waited. Minutes passed like hours. When nothing followed, I exhaled quietly and eased the safe door shut. The house had grown colder. I wrapped my shawl tighter and moved toward the kitchen. I needed to think, clearly, quietly. There was still one thing missing. The proof of their intent. The link between their lies and my name. The recordings were a start, but I needed something recent. Something that tied Michael and Jenna to what they'd done in my hospital room. I went to the drawer where I kept my old cell phone. The red light blinked faintly, still recording. I'd left it running earlier that day before heading to bed. I scrolled through the files and found one dated that afternoon. I pressed play. Jenna's voice came first, sharp and impatient. "You should have told her it was part of the insurance package." Michael replied, "She doesn't know what she signed. It's done. Just a few more forms and the place is ours." Jenna laughed softly. "Then we'll move her to that care facility near Clearwater. She'll think it's a vacation." I stopped the recording. My hand trembled as I held the phone. A care facility. That's where they planned to send me. Far away, out of sight, out of mind. The rage came slow, like a tide rising over rocks. It didn't roar, it whispered. I turned back to the safe and placed the phone inside, next to Daniel's recordings. Then I took out my blue notebook from my pocket and added a final line for the night. November 8th, they think they've won. The house still listens. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then, almost without thinking, I picked up my husband's camera from the shelf. An old one with films still inside. I took a picture of the open safe, the documents, the tapes, the envelope. Proof frozen in light. The flash illuminated the study for a second, And in that light I saw something on the floor near the doorway. A footprint. Muddy. Fresh. I knelt down. The print was small. Jenna's shoe size, probably. She'd been here tonight. I felt a chill creep up my spine. She must have come in while I was in the kitchen earlier, maybe checking if I'd found anything. Maybe she thought I'd fallen asleep again. I wiped the footprint gently with a tissue and dropped it into the safe. Not because I needed it for evidence, but because I wanted her to wonder where it went. The hours crawled by. Around 2 in the morning I made myself a cup of tea, sitting by the window where the moonlight cut through the blinds in pale stripes. The street outside was empty except for a single car parked across the road. A dark sedan. For a moment I thought it was a coincidence. Then I saw the faint glow of a phone screen inside the car. Someone watching. I turned off my kitchen light and waited. The car stayed for another 20 minutes, then slowly pulled away. I didn't sleep that night. Instead I sat at the desk writing every detail down. The time, the sound of the engine, the faint smell of exhaust that lingered even after the car left. My handwriting stayed steady. That surprised me. By dawn I'd packed a small bag. Nothing obvious, just enough to look like a weekend trip. A few clothes, my notebook, the house deed, and the cassette labeled Michael, 2010. Before leaving I opened the safe one last time. I placed my husband's letter on top of everything else and whispered, "Keep it safe for me, love." The dial turned with a soft click, locking the secrets inside. As I straightened the bookshelf back into place I caught my reflection in the glass frame nearby. My face looked older, yes, but not defeated. My eyes had a new steadiness. When I stepped outside, the morning air was sharp with the smell of damp leaves. The world was waking up, but I felt as if I'd already been awake for years. I walked down the porch steps slowly, checking each corner of the street. The same black sedan was parked 2 houses away, engine running. A man sat inside this time, wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. He pretended to scroll his phone, but I could feel his gaze. I smiled faintly, pretending not to notice. Then I turned and locked the front door, slipping the key into my purse. If they wanted a show, I'd give them one. Because tonight the safe had spoken. And I finally knew what I had to say back. That thought followed me from the driveway to the courthouse steps 2 weeks later, echoing louder than my own heartbeat. The morning air smelled like rain and metal, the kind of scent that clings to you after a storm. I stood on the courthouse steps, clutching my old leather purse. Inside, the flash drive, my blue notebook, and the envelope that had survived everything. Jenna and Michael arrived together, of course. They parked close to the entrance, stepping out in coordinated tones of beige and arrogance. He fixed his tie in the car window's reflection. She adjusted her pearl earrings, the same ones she'd stolen from my jewelry box. When she caught me watching, she smiled. That slow, pitying smile that only the truly cruel know how to deliver. "Mom," Michael said with rehearsed warmth. "You didn't have to come. We told you we'd handle everything." I met his eyes. "I'm aware. That's exactly why I came." He blinked, thrown off for half a second before recovering his charm. "Once the paperwork clears, you'll be more comfortable. Less stress." Behind him, Jenna muttered, "If only you'd signed the rest earlier." I didn't answer. I just reached into my purse and felt the cool edge of the flash drive between my fingers. "Let's go inside," I said. The courtroom smelled faintly of disinfectant and wood polish, like someone had tried to scrub away the truth. The judge hadn't arrived yet, but the lawyer Michael had hired, a sharp man in a gray suit, was already setting up stacks of papers at the front. He didn't look at me, not once. I sat quietly on the opposite bench. The wooden seat was cold against my palms. My heart thudded in slow, heavy beats, but my mind was strangely calm, like a lake before a thunderclap. When the bailiff finally called the session to order, everyone stood. The judge entered, expression unreadable. I watched her hands, steady and practiced. She'd seen hundreds of families destroy themselves over money. Ours would just be another entry in her docket. "Reynolds versus Reynolds," the clerk announced. "Case concerning disputed property and financial transfer of assets." My son stood confidently, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "this is simply a matter of confirming rightful management of my mother's estate. She's elderly, unwell, and we only want to ensure her comfort." The lawyer nodded along. Jenna placed her hand dramatically over her heart, as if this were all some act of mercy. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Reynolds, Do you have representation today? I do not, I said. My voice didn't shake. But I have something better than that. Michael laughed softly, a nervous sound he tried to disguise as confidence. She means notes, Your Honor. She keeps journals. I opened my purse and pulled out the blue notebook, setting it gently on the table. Notes, I said, and records. And one more thing. The judge's brow lifted. Proceed. I plugged the flash drive into the laptop at the evidence desk. The clerk leaned over to assist, but I waved him off gently. I know how, I said. A hush fell over the room when the first audio clip began to play. Michael's voice filled the courtroom speakers, clear, unmistakable. She doesn't know what she signed. It's done. Just a few more forms and the place is ours. Jenna's voice followed, cool and certain. Then we'll move her to that care facility near Clearwater. She'll think it's a vacation. A murmur rippled through the room. Michael's lawyer shot up from his chair. Objection, Your Honor. This could be. The judge raised a hand. Sit down. Let it play. I sat back, my fingers resting lightly on the edge of the table. I didn't look at Michael or Jenna. I didn't need to. The sound of their voices was enough. The recording ended, leaving a silence so thick it pressed against the walls. You could almost hear people breathing again one by one. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Reynolds, where did you obtain this? From my phone, I said simply. I record my conversations. Helps me remember details. And this conversation took place when? The day after I was discharged from the hospital. Jenna whispered something to Michael, but he didn't respond. His face was pale now, that slick charm drained away. The lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, even if this recording is admissible, it doesn't prove any illegal action. My clients were discussing future care. Future care, I said quietly, cutting him off. That's an interesting way to describe forging my signature. Gasps echoed again, small and sharp. The judge turned to me. You're alleging forgery? Yes, Your Honor, I replied. On property documents and a home equity loan filed without my consent. I reached into my purse again, this time pulling out the photocopies from the safe. The deed, the notarized will, the signature comparison I'd had verified by an independent consultant. Everything they filed traces back to these dates, I said. You'll find my supposed signature here. I slid the page forward. But this, I flipped to another, was my signature from that same month on a hospital form. Compare them. The difference was unmistakable even to the untrained eye. Michael stood abruptly. Mom, stop this. You're confused. You don't know what you're doing. I met his gaze, and for a moment, I saw the boy who used to leave flowers on my nightstand every Mother's Day. But that boy was gone. The man standing before me was someone who'd traded love for greed. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. Jenna finally spoke, her voice brittle. We were trying to protect your assets. You don't understand how complicated finances are. Complicated. I repeated. You mean like draining my savings into your joint account? Her mouth opened then closed. The lawyer tried again. Your Honor, this is an emotional family matter. Perhaps we could take a recess. No, the judge said firmly. Continue. The air grew heavier as the next file loaded on the screen. A video this time. The security footage from the doorbell camera I'd retrieved from the cloud backup. It showed Michael and Jenna carrying boxes out of my garage. Jenna's voice echoed faintly through the audio. She won't even notice half this stuff's gone. The timestamp glowed in the corner. 2 days after I'd been admitted to the hospital. The judge leaned back, silent. Michael rubbed his temples, muttering something under his breath. You recorded everything. Not everything, I said softly. Just enough. He looked up then, his face a mix of anger and fear. You're ruining me. No, I said. You did that yourself. The lawyer whispered frantically to him, urging him to stay calm. But Michael's voice rose, cracking under the pressure. You don't know what it's like. You left me with nothing after Dad died. You sat in that house while I struggled to build a life. You had it easy. Easy. The words stung more than I expected. I took a slow breath. Your father and I built that house together. We gave you everything we could. You wanted more. His hands trembled. You don't get it. We deserved a chance. At what cost? I asked quietly. My home. My dignity. He didn't answer. The judge cleared her throat. I've heard enough for today. Michael's lawyer started to protest, but she cut him off. Save it. Mrs. Reynolds, you've presented credible evidence of fraud and signature falsification. I'll be referring this for criminal review. Michael's face drained of color. Jenna's hand slipped off his arm. The bailiff stepped forward, collecting the files from my table. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, curiosity, pity, disbelief. The judge gathered her papers. This hearing is adjourned. Her gavel struck once, sharp and final. I didn't move right away. The sound still echoed in my chest like a heartbeat. When I finally stood, Michael turned toward me, desperation flickering behind his anger. You'd destroy your own family for this? I looked at him steadily. You destroyed it when you stopped being my son. Jenna stepped closer, her voice trembling with venom. You'll regret this, old woman. You think anyone will believe? The bailiff stepped between us. Ma'am, that's enough. She bit her lip and turned away. Outside, the afternoon sun was blinding. Reporters had gathered, murmuring questions, snapping photos. I ignored them all. I just walked down the courthouse steps slowly, feeling each one beneath my feet. Doris was waiting at the bottom, holding a paper cup of coffee. I watched the live stream, she said quietly. You handled it like a queen. I smiled faintly. Queens lose crowns too, Doris. I just learned how to build mine back. He squeezed my hand. They won't recover from this. Neither will I said, but maybe that's the point. When I got home, the house was still. The safe behind the bookshelf waited, silent but loyal. I ran my hand over the wood, feeling the faint vibration of the refrigerator hum down the hall. The small sounds that mean life goes on. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. The court hadn't ruled yet on everything. There were still hearings, reviews, and paperwork to come. But as I sat down in the quiet living room, sunlight filtering through the curtains, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace trying to find its way back in. The courtroom had gone silent, but my truth was finally loud enough to be heard. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, touching the edge of the coffee table like it had been waiting for me to notice it. The same living room where my son once threw his toy cars, where my husband fell asleep with the television still humming. Now it was still, peaceful, almost sacred in its silence. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched. The black sedan that used to idle near my mailbox was gone. The house, stripped of pretense and deceit, had returned to me. I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, the steam curling up into the morning air. The courtroom papers lay on the table, verdict pending but direction clear. Fraud charges filed. Bank accounts frozen. The system, slow but deliberate, was finally turning in my favor. Still, there was an emptiness in the quiet. Justice, I'd learned, doesn't heal. It just evens the ground you stand on. Then the doorbell rang. I opened the door slowly, my hand steady on the knob. It was Doris, my neighbor, clutching a grocery bag. You've barely been out all week, she said softly. I thought you could use something sweet. Inside was a small box of lemon squares, her favorite recipe. You're too kind, I said, smiling. Kind, she laughed. You're the one who stood up there and tore the truth out of them without raising your voice. That's something, Eleanor. I hesitated before answering. It didn't feel like victory, Doris. It felt like surgery. Necessary, but it leaves a scar. He squeezed my hand. Scars are proof you healed. When she left, I stood at the doorway for a while, listening to the soft wind in the trees. It was strange how peace felt heavier than rage, quieter but deeper. Later that afternoon, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single folded note in Michael's handwriting. You've destroyed our family. I hope you're proud. There was no apology. No remorse. Just blame. I stared at his words for a long moment, then placed the letter on the counter. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I took a lighter from the drawer and flicked it open. The flame trembled, small but certain. The paper curled as the edges caught fire, turning his accusation into ash. I watched it burn in the sink until nothing remained but a black stain that wiped away easily with water. Let the past go, I told myself. You've carried enough ghosts. That evening I opened the safe again. The same old dial, the same smooth turn. The sound comforted me now. Inside lay the items I'd placed before. The tapes, the deed, the blue notebook, and one new addition. A sealed letter addressed to my attorney. I added one final thing, the small silver locket I used to wear every day. Inside, the picture of Daniel and me smiling like the world was still whole. I set it gently on top. "Everything we built is safe again," I whispered. "It took longer than it should have, but it's done." The click of the safe locking echoed through the room like the end of a chapter. Night fell quietly. I made myself dinner, just soup and toast, and ate by the window watching the streetlights flicker to life. For once, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Halfway through my meal, the phone rang. The caller ID made my chest tighten. Correctional facility. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But curiosity won. "Hello." Pause. Then Michael's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Mom." I didn't speak. "They're giving me one call before the arraignment," he said quickly. I wanted to say it wasn't supposed to go that far. Jenna pushed me. Stop," I said softly. "You made choices, Michael. You signed papers. You smiled while you lied. Don't tell me it wasn't supposed to go that far." He was crying now. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I thought you'd forgive me like always." Forgive. The word felt heavy, familiar. How many times had I done exactly that? Smoothed things over, softened his edges, made excuses. "I already did," I said finally. "That's how I survived you." He went silent. The line clicked dead a few seconds later. The next morning I walked to the garden. The air smelled of wet soil and lilac. I hadn't tended it in months, but somehow the flowers had bloomed on their own, defiant and bright. As I pulled weeds from the corner bed, I found something small buried near the fence. A key. Old, rusted but familiar. The spare key to the safe. The one Daniel used to keep in his tool shed. I held it in my palm, feeling the rough edges press into my skin. He'd hidden it there for me. Always thinking ahead, even from the grave. A laugh escaped me, soft, almost disbelieving. "You always did trust me more than anyone else," I said to the air. The garden seemed to answer in the rustle of leaves. Later that week I met with my attorney downtown. The building smelled like paper and coffee, clean and professional. He slid a few documents across the desk. "The court has confirmed the property remains solely in your name. The accounts will be restored once the fraud review is complete. And your son's bail was denied." I nodded slowly. "Thank you." He studied me for a moment. "Most people would want revenge. You don't seem angry." I smiled faintly. "Anger burns too fast. I needed something that lasts longer. Truth." He leaned back. "Truth can be lonely. So can lies," I said. As I left the office, the sun broke through the clouds, bright enough to make me squint. For the first time in months, the world didn't look gray. That night, I sat by the fireplace with Doris. We shared tea, the TV humming softly in the background. "They say Jenna took a plea deal," she said carefully. I nodded. Of course she did. She always preferred an easy out. Doris sipped her tea. "Do you ever miss them?" The question sat heavy in the air. "I miss who I thought they were," I admitted. "But missing them won't bring them back. It'll only keep me where they left me, in that hospital bed, signing away my life." She nodded slowly, understanding. "So what now?" I looked at the firelight flickering against the walls. "Now I live in peace. That's the one thing they never wanted for me." When Doris left, I walked through the house one last time before bed. The photos were back on the mantel. Not the ones of Michael and Jenna, but the ones of my husband and me, the ones that told a story worth remembering. The clock ticked steadily. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt alive again, breathing with me. I stopped by the safe and ran my fingers across the wood of the bookshelf hiding it. "Thank you," I whispered, not sure if I was speaking to the house, the safe, or the man who built both. Then I turned off the lights. At dawn, I woke to birds outside the window. A simple sound I hadn't heard in weeks. I brewed my coffee and carried it to the porch. The street was calm. The for sale sign was gone. Across the lawn, a moving truck was parked in front of the empty house next door. A young couple stepped out, carrying boxes, laughing as they tripped over the curb. The woman waved when she saw me. "Good morning." I smiled and lifted my cup in greeting. "Welcome to the neighborhood." He grinned. "Thank you. We're lucky to have someone like you next door." Lucky. The word stayed with me long after she went inside. I'd forgotten how it sounded when it wasn't a lie. As the sun climbed higher, I felt the weight in my chest lift, slowly but surely. The house behind me, once filled with betrayal, now stood as proof of endurance. Justice hadn't come wrapped in joy. Came in paperwork, recordings, and truth that cut both ways. But it came, and that was enough. I sat back in my chair, the wooden boards warm beneath my feet. The wind brushed through the trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear Daniel's voice again, steady and kind. "You did it, Ellie." I closed my eyes and smiled. "Yes," I whispered. "I did." And in the quiet that followed, I finally understood. Revenge wasn't destruction. It was reclamation. If this story struck a chord with you, hit subscribe and join our community of women who love powerful revenge tales. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here.